It is my pleasure to welcome you to the fifth and sadly already last part of the crash course International Marketing. This video lecture is about communicating value in international markets. As usual in this crash course, if you would like to brush up your knowledge about communicating value in general, I would like to refer you to the crash course marketing, which you find on my website godperson.online. If you like to dive deeper into international marketing with regard to communicating value, a good choice is the book Global Marketing by Hollandson and Bogdanovich. First, what would we like to achieve when designing and executing communication campaigns in general? Let us go back to the basics. What is happening in a market? Someone knows our brand, likes our brand, or the brand has a positive image, then the brand is bought, and hopefully there are loyal customers who buy more often. You can understand these steps of the buying process: awareness, image, buying, and loyalty as the steps every customer goes through more or less consciously. But you can also understand these steps on an aggregated level as frequency distributions. A lot of people know our brand. A part of these who know our brand like our brand, and again, fewer buy our brand, and then even fewer than this are loyal customers. Now, as a company, or from a company perspective, our objective is to maximize or optimize our profits. And the precondition for doing this, achieving this financial objective, is the steps of the buying process. Of course, if you multiply buying times the buying frequency, you have the units, the number of products you've sold. If you multiply these with the price, you have the revenue. You deduce the cost, and then you have your profit. That means to come to a profit, we need to influence awareness, image, buying, or loyalty through our communication campaigns. And these are the thrusts or objectives of communication. Now, what falls under communicating value? Or if you think in the 4 P's of the marketing mix, what falls under promotion? You have conventional marketing communication, like classic advertising, commercials on the telly, out-of-home advertising, sponsoring, and so forth. You have unconventional marketing communication, which is normally labeled as guerrilla marketing, like ambush, ambient, and virus marketing. Then you have online marketing, with your website, your social media marketing, and so on. And also personal selling, which is very important in the international realm of business. Remember the slide I've shown you before with the steps of the buying process and these steps that we would like to influence through our marketing campaigns and through our communication. Everything that is on this slide, rather to the left, focuses more on improving awareness and image. Everything that goes to the right focuses more on sales and loyalty. Probably self-explanatory when looking at personal selling. Firstly, I would like to look at marketing communication, the conventional, unconventional way, and online marketing, and the specific issues or points you have to consider when going international. But before the international perspective, quick definitions. What is conventional marketing communication? That entails all classic non-online mass communication activities of a company, which are more or less overt and aim to influence the buying behavior of its target group. So normally the audience knows, oh, that is a commercial, that is marketing communication, that wants to influence my behavior. Guerrilla marketing as an unconventional way of marketing communication is a communication instrument that incorporates surprising elements and aims to reach and, of course, influence a large portions of the brand's target group at low cost. The principal idea of guerrilla marketing you can see on the right. That is the LSD effect. We have something that is surprising. There's something people do not expect. So I see something I do not expect, say, wow, what's that? Take a picture and share it through social media, for instance. And that is the second part, surprise effect, diffusion effect. So the customers themselves distribute the message. And that means we have a low cost effect. We do not invest very much in, especially the media cost, in booking expensive commercials on the telly and so forth. In the end, this is the low cost effect. We have a very good ratio of investment to results. Finally, online marketing is all of the marketing communication measures that we take that use the internet or social media channels. And again, we want to influence the target group's thinking, feeling, and behavior. What is the typically perhaps slightly simplified process of planning and designing marketing communication? So first of all, we have to set our objectives. What do we want to achieve with our communication campaign? Do we want to improve awareness? Do we want to improve the image? Do we want to increase sales? Do we want to increase the number of loyal customers? That's what we need to set first. Then we determine the communication budget. How much do we want to invest, or how much do we need to invest to achieve these objectives? Then comes the media plan, which means through what channels do we go? Do we have commercials on the telly? Do we have spots on the radio? Do we have outdoor advertising? Do we have online advertising? Do we have social media advertising? And so forth. And finally, it's the communication design. So what is the message we are delivering, and how should our advertisements and other means that we use look like? So that's what you normally do. And in international marketing, you're not magically doing something else. But you need to translate the marketing communication concept into the economic, legal, and especially cultural environment of the target country you're operating in. And against this backdrop, and remember the cultural differences, it's very hard to really understand another culture, which I explained in the previous section of this crash course. Against this backdrop, it is very much advised to engage a media and advertising agency that is familiar with the target countries, the foreign countries and cultures you're operating in. Now, let's look at these steps or phases of planning and designing marketing communication, and what are the main points you need to take into consideration when operating internationally. First, the communication objectives and the communication budget. You need to predominantly consider the economic environment, and additionally your company's resources and competencies. So what is the market size? What is the purchasing power in this market? That very much it depends how much you should invest. Furthermore, how much money do we actually have to invest, and what are our cultural competencies? So for instance, a huge communication budget for a small market like Malawi, that has a very low GDP in comparison to other countries, and even a very low or even lower GDP per capita, probably not the best idea. Then it might be a better idea to invest more in Germany with a relatively high purchasing power and a large market, or even in China, not so much a super high GDP per capita, but blimey, a very large market. Let's have a look at the media plan. You predominantly need to take the economic and also the cultural environment sort of on the same level or with the same emphasis into consideration. You need to look what is the media coverage of the channels we can use. Who is using what channel? What's the attitude towards media and advertising? What communication patterns we see? For instance, an example which makes this probably very much clear, look at the literacy rate of the UK and Chad. In the United Kingdom, virtually everyone is able to read. In Chad, that is 22.3%. So having an advertisement in a magazine or in a newspaper, probably it's a better idea in the UK than it is in Chad. Or think of internet and social media advertising. In countries like Sweden or Iceland, there are virtually no restrictions on the internet, and you can happily go with internet or social media advertising. Facebook advertising in countries like Iran, where Facebook is banned, probably doesn't work out too well. There you would only get these fellows who use VPN clients to circumvent the ban of social media sites there. When looking at the communication design, you predominantly should consider the cultural environment. Look at the language differences between your and the target country. Look at the different norms and values, as well as the communication patterns. To give you a few examples, just the color white. In the Western world, countries like the UK, Australia, or the US, the Western world, white stands for purity, new beginnings, weddings. In China, it is a quite different story. White might also stand for purity, but it is associated with death, funerals, and mourning. Another aspect or another example is the reference to sex in advertisements or commercials. The subtle reference. You're not having a porn movie there. And at least until recently, Western low-context cultures accepted very much subtle references to sex. In Middle Eastern high-context cultures, you probably should not do that. And even in cultures that we consider as being relatively close, like the United Kingdom, Australia, and the US, the language might differ. It's absolutely fine in the UK or Australia to say, "Oh, right, mate, may I have a pint, mate," and so forth. The word mate, synonym for friend, roughly, not everyone will understand in the United States. There, one would rather say buddy or pal. Now, after pointing out what is to consider in marketing communication, including online marketing and guerrilla marketing, in this section I would like to place stronger emphasis on personal selling, as that is quite often more important in international marketing than the normal, if you want to call it like this, marketing communication. Now, what is personal selling? What we want to do through personal selling is acquire customers. And that means we want to close sales deals. And more than this, we want to establish a strong relationship with the customer so that the customer buys more often from us and not only once. But more than just selling stuff and closing deals, normally we would like to offer additional services. And this is what we're doing through direct personal contacts. So the typical process of personal selling is before you make contact with your prospects, you identify possible customers. Then you get some information. As Napoleon Bonaparte said, all battles are won in preparation. No, I think this was not Bonaparte. This is Wing Chun or whatever this guy called from China. I'm sorry. This was the Art of War guy who said all battles are won in preparation. So you get information about your prospects. Then you establish contact and you form a relationship. And depending on culture, this phase is more or less important. In low context cultures, normally as a very short phase, and high context culture, this takes some time and might be the game winning or the match winning phase. You need to, as a salesperson, you need to understand the customer's needs, problems, and restrictions they have. You present a solution, then it goes to negotiations about the price, objections that you want to overcome, and so forth. You close the deal, happy days. As I said before, you do not want to sell just once. Normally you want to sell on and on. So you have follow-up contacts and offer additional services. Now, personal sales, quite obviously, is done by persons. So you need to set up your sales force. And this is what I want to come next, how to set up and structure your sales force. There's several dimensions of structuring your sales force. You can look at this as having a geographic, product focus, and a customer focus structure. A geographic structure makes sense if you have a target group that is dispersed over the globe in the international context. So you might have a sales force for North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, or you can even distinguish further for the Middle East and so forth. You can also approach the market with a product focus structure. That makes very much sense if you have a complex and non-self-explanatory product, like a fighter jet or a complex power plant or whatever you have in the industry, what industry solutions you have there that are highly complex. And a more customer-focused approach is key account management. Then you have one major customer who you cultivate individually, with whom you form an individual relationship. Typical example is the automotive industry. Suppliers to the few, I think it's less than 20, I hope I'm correct there, less than 20 major car manufacturers in the world. So if you're a supplier, you will treat every customer individually. So Mercedes, Toyota, VW, Renault, BMW, and what have you, they're all individual targets or target segments, one can call them, and you have individual managers or teams who deal with them. These are your key accounts. What you normally find with medium-sized to larger companies is a matrix organization. There you can combine the strength of the geographic and product focus structure and hopefully mitigate the weaknesses of the two. So that a matrix organization where you have a geographic and a regional approach makes very much sense for complex and non-self-explanatory products, and at the same time geographically dispersed target groups. So the organization will look like something on the right. You have your product managers and teams, and you have your regional sales teams. And that is what you find with most companies that are globally active. Problem always is the intersections of responsibility for the regional team and the product team. That is something, there is no silver bullet that you can solve, but this is what you have to mitigate and work around. Finally, what I want to sensitize you to is you do not only have outbound sales, meaning a sales force that goes out, goes to the customer and actively tries to win new customers. You also have inbound sales. Inbound sales means customers have heard about you and then they call in and ask for a solution. So you should normally, in a company, you should have both the outbound sales force and the inbound sales department. Now, I've mentioned key account management, and I would like to dive a bit deeper into this. What can you do? As quite often you find this in international business. So I've mentioned this perhaps only briefly, what key account management is. Here, definition once again. Key account management means the individual cultivation of one client with global operations. And this client is of strategic importance to the company. You can call it a segment of one approach. There are 3 different ways of how you can establish international key account management. You can have HQ to HQ communications or organizations, so headquarters to headquarters, which, if you see it on the figure on the bottom, will be supplier headquarters talking directly to customer headquarters. That makes very much sense if your customer has a centralized organization, and this is typically used when the product you're selling is globally standardized. On the other hand, or the other extreme, you can have country-to-country organization. That makes very much sense if your customer has a very decentralized organization, and typically you see this when the products are very much localized, adapted to the local markets your client, your customer operates in. And of course, a balanced organization, you combine HQ to HQ and country to country approach, and then headquarters are talking to each other to set the frame, what we want to do, how we want to cooperate. Then on a more detailed, rather operational level, the country salespeople and the country procurement department, they talk to each other. You can go even further. And then, if you go even further, supplier and customer, they build teams which cooperate in research development, business model development, and similar. That is quite typical for the automotive industry. Just think of the supplier of safety system, airbags, and so forth, like Autoliv from Sweden. These safety systems, they need to fit into the customer's cars, like a Mercedes car, BMW car, Toyota car. I don't know the client list of Autoliv. So it makes sense that the Autoliv engineers, salespeople, work together with the Mercedes, Toyota, BMW, and so forth engineers and procurement people. Now, this is the organization, how you can organize a sales force, and then also go to key account management. But you need the right people for the job. So, how do you select your sales force team? The 4 main selection criteria I recommend are customer knowledge, cultural knowledge, social skills, and product and technology know-how. So customer knowledge, you definitely need to understand the needs and objectives of the customer. That is why the customer buys from you, if his or her needs and objectives are met. So you need to understand them. Salesforce should understand, or your salespeople should understand, what is of benefit to the customer. Cultural knowledge is quite important in an international market, because you need to understand the culture. You need to know how to negotiate, how to approach, how to build relationships in cultures that are different to your own home culture. In this context, social skills are important. So empathy. I need to understand the feelings and thoughts of my counterpart, and I need to be able to persuade my counterpart, my potential client, to buy from me. And finally, it's a product technology know-how. If I don't understand the technology, I can, so not in the latest in every detail, but I need to understand the technology, and more importantly, I need to understand what benefits, what value comes out of this technology for a customer. Now, what kind of people who fulfill these criteria can I choose for my sales force? I can get people on board from the target country I'm in. That makes very much sense. They should have the cultural knowledge. They possibly or probably know the customers in their country And within this culture they're operating in, or supposed to be operating in, they probably have social skills. So when you have markets with a substantially different culture than your home country, it's a good idea to include target country personnel in your sales force. You can also have third country personnel that come from some whatever other country. That could make sense if you have a global industry that ticks sort of not by individual country rules, but by global rules. Like, again, there's the arms market. That might make very sense there to have third country personnel. And finally, you have expats, expatriates. So people from your own company that you send abroad, and there makes sense, complex products that needs explaining, to have the engineers or the sales engineers and the sales force that deeply understands the product you are offering. And of course, it quite often makes sense to combine these groups. And I personally would say, especially if you're going to culturally different markets with complex products, combine target country personnel to build relationship with the customers, to understand your customers, and send expatriates so that your technology functional solution can be properly explained to your customers. When you operate abroad, the target country personnel, they now know about the country they're living in. But the expats, they quite often don't. And so I would like to come to how to manage expatriates. What are the phases of expatriate management? First, you need to make a strategic decision. Should we send someone abroad? And for what reasons? Then you select your employees you send abroad and you train them. When they are abroad, you need to support them. And later on, it's repatriation. At some point, they're coming back home. You need to reintegrate these fellows into your company again. Let me give you a bit more of an insight into support abroad. Normally, every expat who's sent abroad goes through 4 phases if everything went well. There might be the odd one out, but that is a normal process. First phase, freshly in the new country, and assuming it's a completely different culture, it's called the honeymoon phase. It's so great, I get new food, new impressions, it's a completely different culture, it's like on holidays, fantastic. But then the expats sort of realize, blimey, that is not like it is at home. I don't get a proper English ale. What I've heard from Germans, oh, what the hell, there's an insult that I don't get proper German bread here. So the culture is quite different. And what quite often exacerbates this situation is that expats on a managerial level, more often than not, are not integrated into the target country society. They're rather, either they are on their own or they're within a group of other expats. So they're not really diving into the culture. And that is a hard phase. And during this phase, quite often, it comes to a failure of the time abroad. But assume everything works out, then the expats adapt to the foreign culture and to their life. And happy days. Then it's a strong performance. Now, let's go through these phases and what you have to look at. The strategic decision for deploying expatriates abroad. Of course, we have the managerial or functional need. We need some process to be fixed abroad. Then we need to send an expert who we only have at home. Of course, that's there. But that should not be your only reason why you send someone. You should also have a long-term perspective that you want to improve your company and enrich your company through the experiences the expat makes abroad. Because what this fellow learns abroad, he or she might bring into the overall international cooperation and even the company at home. So always have these two perspectives, not just the urge to need someone because we need something need to be fixed. Also the strategic approach, how can we improve our international cooperation or company strategically with the skills this fellow learns abroad. Selection, look for functional skills. Of course, they need to do something there. Language skills, social skills, and cultural competencies. Otherwise, there will be disaster abroad. And these skills, especially language skills, social skills, and cultural competencies, you should train before you send the expats abroad. The expats who will be sent abroad should have a solid knowledge of the target country. Of course, this is a good idea. They speak the language and they should understand the culture. Of course, you can only understand the culture when you're in the culture and when you live the life there. But you can come from different levels and you should aim for being as well prepared as possible, not learning from zero when you arrive in the target country. Abroad, you need to support your expats. There's first financial compensation, but that will not suffice. They shouldn't be isolated there abroad, but ideally they should be connected still with a home company or the global company, know what's going on there. Not that they feel later on like an outcast when they're coming back. But you also need to support the day-to-day life as in a different culture in which things are running differently. One might get confused and don't get a grip of life. And give them a connection with home. So, for instance, that they can, if they're half a year abroad, that they can 2, 3, 4 times fly back to have sort of a break from the new culture and refresh in their home culture. Repatriation, quite often forgotten, as quite often is thought, oh, this fellow is going abroad, so he or she should be lucky. That was a sort of positive reward, so should be happy and do his old job. That is not how life works and how people work. So when you're sent abroad, you probably have a very good position, better income through lower taxes, lower cost of living, and all such things. And you might have more responsibility and all such things. When you come back to your home job and you get the same job you had before, for some it feels like a demotion. So try to find an adequate position for the guy you've sent abroad. And that goes hand in hand, what I've said at the start of these phases. Have a long-term vision for what expatriate management can bring to your company for our strategic decision. Similarly, integration the home team. And then, of course, as I've just said, strategic vision, utilize the expertise that the expert has acquired when he or she comes back home. Finally, sales negotiations. You have to negotiate with someone from a different culture. So you have the normal sales process. That is not different in other cultures, but you have to fill out the phases of the sales process differently and emphasize on different aspects of selling. So you have the different cultures. Here's the example of low context to high context cultures. I'm exaggerating a bit, but think of Germany. You want to sell something in Germany. You go to someone, to a potential client, and say, all right, mate, this is what I've brought to you. This is the product. This is the value you get out of this, your utility. This is the price. What do you say? You want to buy it? Okay, this is an exaggeration, but this is an approach, or I think you get this, how you can sell in Germany. If you go into Latin American, or one of the Arab countries, or Japan, and you do this, right, mate, this is what I have for you, this is the price, will you buy it? You will never ever in a million years make a deal. There, it's a high context culture. You need to form a relationship first. And then out of this relationship, later, there comes then the actual business deal. So you need to adjust your sales process and your sales behavior to the culture of the target country. In this context, the self-reference criterion can help you very much. The self-reference criterion says that one thinks and behaves in the framework of his or her own culture. That means we understand the world, we feel, we think, and we behave according to the norms and values and the behavioral patterns that we find in our culture. And that doesn't need to be conscious. It's quite often it's done unconsciously. You can test yourself. But some things you're doing, thinking, so you think, all right, is this now a cultural thing or is this a universal thing? More often than not, you will find out there's a strong cultural impact, so that is a self-reference criterion. And this is what you want to get out of our sales negotiations and learn from this. It's a 4-step process. So you define the situation or problem or objectives in the framework of your own culture, of your home culture. Then you show a bit of cultural empathy and define the same situation, problem, objective from the perspective or in the framework of the foreign culture you're dealing with. When comparing the situation defined in your home culture and the situation defined in the foreign culture, you can identify the self-reference criterion. One could say you can identify the cultural gap. And based on this, you can deduce a solution for the foreign culture, for the foreign cultural context, and by this you have eliminated the self-reference criterion. And with the elimination of the self-reference criterion, we are at the end. What is left to me is to say thank you for your attention, and more importantly, I wish you all the best for your operations in an international environment. What is left is to say, as I said, all the best to you and bye-bye.